All right, another video today, and today I want to talk about. I've been getting asked a lot about how should I go about starting to learn drawing if you're just beginning, and I'll kind of make this video between. It's kind of gonna be like more than just like beginners, but also kind of I don't know if you're transitioning into drawing from imagination as well and that sort of thing, then this video might help as well. And just like, I don't know, just random mumbling throughout too. But one thing kind of wanted to talk about is if I was to go back in time and kind of like tell my past self or like go back in time and carry like all the knowledge I know now, then I would probably just start with learning the like basics of the fundamentals. And what I would consider as some of the fundamentals would be like perspective. Perspective would be a pretty big one. Perspective is like basically um almost like the grid for drawing. Like it's like space basically between things and that sort of thing. So if I was gonna learn the fundamentals, I think I would learn pretty like bare minimum as like almost just gain like an understanding. I think another one that I would consider a perspective, I think I looked up online the other day and it's not really considered one, or it's like grouped with shapes and that sort of thing. But I think anatomy would be really important. Let me get some water. And then like light and shadow. And then yeah, light and shadow would definitely be one. And then color, I'm pretty sure is one. I would consider like also grouping color with light and shadow since they're pretty similar, and then like shape with anatomy. So I would learn anatomy, perspective, and then one thing I would do is try to not think of these things as separate things, but as like a whole of drawing. So anatomy together with perspective and that sort of thing. So grouping all of these together, but as long as you kind of like know what they are, I think that's the most important part. And these, if you think, I kind of have been thinking about how to explain this, and I think the closest thing I can think of is like almost like video games. To where this initial learning of perspective, anatomy, and light and shadow is almost like some sort of character creation phase to where you're kind of like, or I would consider this kind of like the code of a game. Like it's the foundation. I mean, it's the fundamentals, but if you think of it as like a foundation and not rules, because the fundamentals are basically kind of just what people have found to be useful for art. And there's still probably a lot of things that just aren't discovered yet. There's probably a million better ways to be doing this, but we just haven't kind of explored enough from that. So these are definitely not rules, but more of like I would think of like the code of like a video game, and it's almost things that are in the background. Because when I'm drawing, I'm not thinking about fundamentals at all while I'm creating something. It's just like all as a single singular thing. So all of the fundamentals kind of just put into one sort of character, and then if I really wanted to, kind of like give him a suit and make him into a singular object. So fundamentals are kind of like a background coding of how to kind of basically create something out of nothing. If you're talking like about just on a page, since the page is blank, this is kind of like one of the most basic ways to create something on the page. So I would learn basic amount of fundamentals, almost just kind of like knowing like anatomy. I think if you know, and why I mean basic amount of knowledge on it is because most of the fundamentals will probably come to you as you're drawing and learn later. So like as long as you have a basic, you can always be improving on the fundamentals as you're drawing. So it's not like you need to learn all the fundamentals and then go into before you can draw. It's just I think knowing about the fundamentals is pretty important just because it can give you a little bit more freedom and it's like an extra thing to play around with. And then like so for anatomy, just knowing kind of about simple things like that humans have two eyes, they have a nose and a mouth and an ear, like and eyebrows, and just like knowing different features, and then like humans have a neck, and then like some you don't even need to know like that many muscles either, but just knowing kind of like some basics, which you might already kind of know a lot just from like being alive, really. So just knowing a basic, and then I think you can, and then the rest will just come like as you keep drawing and experimenting. So the first thing, fundamentals, like very very basic, knowing of them, and kind of like for perspective, the one thing I think that is most important to learn is just kind of like that things need space to breathe. And if this head is right here, then I will need like this character is gonna need some space to be able to move around and things like that. So for me to put another character behind, I I think space is the most important thing to kind of like think about for perspective wise. And then just giving things kind of space to breathe is usually along the lines of how I go about perspective. I'm not thinking about it while I'm drawing, but I am thinking about space and things needing to be a little bit further off from each other to kind of give each character a little bit of space apart. And then even along that, for perspective as well, another thing that I think is, well, it's still space, but space can also just not be like where the character is positioned, but also what's on him. So, like a helmet would need to be sitting on top of the character. And then I try to think through the character and his eyebrows, his nose, and then I usually add straps and things like that, but have them sitting on top of the character. So I think that's another still along the lines of space of things, but that is where I think perspective is the most important. And then so like the space just helps with setting things up. So yeah, I think that's the most important like thing to sort of grasp from perspective is space and anatomy, just basic knowing where features are. And they can just be such bare bone like knowledge of it to just get started on creating your own stuff from imagination. And then light and shadow. If for light and shadow, basically all I'm thinking about is almost like a rounded object. And if I cut this object in half and split it in half, it doesn't matter what it is, but I'm always thinking of halves of things. Since most things in nature are pretty symmetrical, then everything can kind of be split in half. So then like the half thing, then half will be in shadow and half is in light. And same thing for the face. So if I kind of like, if my light source is coming from above an angle, I'm splitting character's head in half. And then, but that's not the only form on here. If this was a circle or a sphere, then it would be. But then I'm splitting kind of like each little section in half. And then since this is all on this half side, then I could shade all of this in and then go more into it. But I think thinking of halves is pretty enough to get going with shading. And same thing, splitting the character in half, facing towards the light source. So I can just have this all in shadow as a basic way. And then like as you keep going and experimenting later, you'll come up with a lot of different ways to keep using these different fundamentals. So just kind of again, perspective, and then lights and shadow, and then anatomy. An anatomy is not just like anatomy of a human, but also anatomy of like a tiger, like whatever subject you want to draw. Anatomy is basically like the inner workings of it. So you could have some sort of machine, and the anatomy would basically be the different parts of the machine. So yeah, I think if you have these three like basic fundamentals and just knowing what they are, I think that's enough to get going. And then from there, I kind of think of the fundamentals as almost like code to a game. And then on the next step, if you wanted to like make it into some sort of process for learning, if that helps. But then I think from that, developing some sort of like character or subject to then kind of place into your world. So if I was gonna like kind of like gamify art in a way, then I would come up with whatever you're interested in. I think that will be the best kind of like subject to pick, I guess, since you're probably gonna have more fun doing something that you like versus something you don't like. And I think that's kind of along the lines of why I wanted to make this video. It's kind of like you don't need to study the fundamentals for years and years. I think that the the more the faster you get into like playing with the game, which I would consider like just drawing whatever you want on the page from imagination is like playing the game. And I think fundamentals is kind of like the base for the game, and then everything else like is built upon it. But it's like such a I think from a learning aspect, it's like such a minor thing. And the fundamentals are basically designed around like drawing. So if you're only like talking, like learning fundamentals, it's kind of like you're talking about the subject and you're learning about the subject. But if you've never done the subject, then it's very hard to learn and kind of know what even matters for your art. Yeah, so I think the faster you can move off of the fundamentals, I would think that it's the better. Just kind of in my opinion from what I know now. And so from that, once you learn a basic grasp of fundamentals, then I think coming up with subjects really that you can create. So let's say I am super into aliens, and that's kind of like what I want to draw. Then I'll do some sort of quick alien, and then from whatever knowledge I have at the time, I will just kind of like play around with aliens. And this is sort of like transitioning to now playing the game. So now this is kind of like character creation stage. You're like off of the title screen. You pick some settings that you want to adjust and things like that. And then this is like the character creation stage. So this is like, and you don't have to do a character, but it's kind of um like choosing something that you're interested in and want to play around with is really the character creation. So I wouldn't like actually draw out an alien first beforehand, but if that kind of helps you, then you could always do that. But this is kind of just what more of an idea standpoint. So if you like thought I want to do aliens, then I'll kind of demonstrate. And I like to kind of like think of if you guys have ever seen the game Spore, how you have like a character creation stage, and you start off as like this little piece of nothing, and you can kind of like stretch and squash that piece of like matter or whatever it is in and stretch it out, and you can like keep stretching it until it ends up with like a body, and then you can attach legs onto it of whatever kind you want. And I played that game a ton as a kid, and I think that's like the closest I've seen to kind of what I'm thinking when I'm drawing is the like spore character creation. And then like from here, if I was playing the game, then I could attach like a head onto my character, and then keep like attaching different little features that I want. And this is what I'm thinking about when not really thinking about it, but this is what I'm doing while I'm drawing is these like mini mini little details and add in features and just keep customizing my character basically. And then if you think of it all in a whole, I think it helps because like there's fundamentals all in here. I have and then this is also like playing the game, and then stretch these wings out, And then, so if you think of like the fundamentals, the character creation, all of that is happening at the same exact time. So let's say the thing I wanted to kind of play around with, and I'll kind of call this like the playground almost. And I would want to, if I was going to go back and learn, I'd want to get to like this playground phase as soon as possible, because this is where, for me, all of the progress I make happens the most. So then you can pretty much play around and do whatever you absolutely want. You can draw anything you want. The only limiting thing is really kind of like how brave you are, and how far you kind of want to like take it. I think a lot of times, especially from imagination, the one thing that always like stumps me for not making progress a lot of times is just like my bravery. So like if I kind of like think of like a theme or an idea, but I'm like, oh, I probably can't do that, then I'm kind of like locking myself in a box and telling myself like these are the limits. But if I'm like super brave and keep an open mind, then I'm able to make a lot more progress, because I'm then like trying perspectives I normally wouldn't, or like trying to adapt off of mistakes and that sort of thing. So kind of like a little example, if I was playing around with dragons, then I would kind of think what's like the most fun thing I could do with this dragon, and kind of like what do I want to play around with. So if this was like my first dragon I drew, and then I'll kind of shade this in if I can do it quick enough. So this is like my first iteration of the dragon. And this is kind of like getting into the learning process and why I think this is the most important stage versus I see a lot of people practice like fundamentals for so long and kind of think that they need to master the fundamentals before moving on. But I think if you just know like bare bones things about the fundamentals, and then you try to get to like actually playing the drawing game as soon as possible, where you're drawing what you want and like how you want, I think you'll have a lot more fun with art in general, because you'll be doing doing what you want. And I think at the end of the day, that's kind of what I think most people want, is to do what they want and have like a sort of freedom. So this was, let's say, you wanted to draw dragons, and this was kind of like your first iteration of the dragon. Then how I sort of practice is literally just playing around with things about the dragon. So I'm like, what do I have on the dragon that I can mess around with, and different features. So the character creation phase is sort of like happening while I'm playing this sort of drawing game at the same time. So I try to lock the focus so it doesn't do the autofocus. Anyways, so I'm kind of thinking like, what are some things I can play around with the dragon? And one thing is maybe I want uh, a different set of horns on him. So then my next dragon, and this could happen like multiple times. I would usually would change as many things as I could think of with the dragon at the same time. So maybe I like the how the mouth shape is, that kind of more narrow thing. So I'll do that same shape if I can. And then I like this little ridge. And I think I'm always trying to like push myself to get a bunch of different angles, different like features and things like that. So that's why I'm doing this from a different angle now, and kind of just like playing around with this dragon and learning with it as I'm creating them. And then have his tongue out. And then let's say for this one, I'll go a little bit more crazy and try something a little bit out of my comfort zone, which would be like a horn that comes out, sort of like a ram. I don't really draw many dragons too, so this would be a pretty good like demonstration of kind of maybe you could follow like a similar sort of way if this process helps you. I just want to say too, like in my other videos, I never want to tell someone how to draw or kind of like how they should think. This is just if I went back in time, how would I go about with like all of my situations I've had in my life or like all of that playing out. This is just the route that I would take to progress faster than the first time. So that's kind of all this is. And then I would add different ears. You can't really see the ears up here because of the hair. But then maybe I like the hair, so I'll keep that similar like horse mane look. And then I'm thinking about that this is from a different angle, so I'm just doing my best to kind of keep that same thing. And then maybe I want to, since there's a round neck, maybe I want to kind of like, this is like the playing around that I was talking about. And now I want to, I'm like, what would happen if I bring the neck around? And now, since this is kind of like his back area, now this brings me out of my comfort zone because I'll have to draw wings from the back view, which is not something I've done before. But I'm kind of going to try my best and just play around with the idea. And I think really the key to art and progression is the more you enjoy doing something, naturally you're going to be like more invested into it. You're going to do it for longer and you'll probably keep with it and just like draw more often and that sort of thing. So I think if you took two people, one really enjoys drawing and their process and kind of like everything about it versus someone who doesn't like their process or drawing, which sometimes it can just be a process thing of or like a subject is kind of why you don't aren't liking art. And I've definitely been in situations where I don't like a certain process or a pen and that sort of thing, and just kind of like playing around with different wings this time and trying my best to pull off this sort of back shot, while also keeping it relatively fast for this video. But then I'll do the same dark wings. And this is kind of like playing the drawing game for me. So I think getting to this stage as fast as possible, where you are taking your interests, your passions, and any subjects you want to experiment with and different ideas, and actively drawing and actually doing the thing you want. And this is kind of like the stage where I definitely made the most progress. I just wasn't like learning much at all from practicing fundamentals. But I think the most important thing from fundamentals is knowing like basics of that there is shadow and there's light, um, and that there's like space in between things, like things have distance to them, and that there's sort of like depth to drawing with perspective, and then the anatomy, like the inner workings of an object. And from here, the fundamentals come back into play. But learning through the actual drawing. So how they would come back is once I finish this character, kind of just give him a big belly to finish it. Here you have his tail come out. Continue the spikes. And then maybe I want him, so to experiment around, I'll do a different pose. And this time, maybe he's sitting down on the floor. And then, so I have different horns. And then, so I learned how to do a new horn shape by just testing it out and experimenting with it. I learned a little bit different shape of ears and positioning, different eyes, like they're different shapes. The face is pretty similar. So like I'm taking the face that I like and then drawing it again so that I am more likely to like keep that information. And then it kind of tells like my brain that I like what I'm seeing, so I'm gonna keep doing it and doing it again. And then it kind of just like um, will naturally remember it better since I have an interest in it. And then I like the body a lot more on this one. And the pose I think is a bit more dynamic. So like those are a lot of things that I learned just from this one little drawing. I learned how to do a back pose because I attempted it. And yeah, I could go on like all day of like the things that I'm only aware of that I learned. There's probably like a lot of other things. Like there's like muscle memory and that sort of thing that's all like background that you might not even know is happening while you're drawing. And this is kind of just how I would go about learning from drawing. If I was to start learning from imagination and transitioning from um, only from reference to wanting to do more of a only imagination. And yeah, this process, like, and I would do it if I was just starting art again. Like, without a doubt, this is the way I would do. It's just had so much more, um, like, positive progression for me than any of the, like, formal teaching ways or ways I was practicing in the past. So I think really if you want to learn something and you want to learn like drawing, then I think actually drawing your interests in things that you like, and if you like to experiment and that sort of thing, then I think going for that rather than kind of like prepping for something, I think is works better for me. And then I could just keep going and drawing more dragons and different things and then different subjects. Like for this, I've never drawn a turtle before, but it kind of just like ended up happening. And then I drew like a different turtle. There's also rats and things that they're fighting. Oh, yeah, there's a turtle up here. This is like an awkward perspective where this character is, and like I wanted to warp the arrow that he got hit by, and it's just like so many things that I'm learning in just single drawings or single iterations of a character, just because of the fact that everything I'm making is kind of like built from the ground up with fundamentals, and to kind of like escalate this learning process even more. I kind of talked about this in my last video, but so if I was drawing a bunch of dragons and I don't know, I like to fill the page. So if I filled the page, then I could go and kind of just like sit on it and not do anything, and then keep like my mind pretty fresh. But if I felt like I ran out of ideas, then I would probably go online and just kind of like Google images dragons or something, and then kind of like look at different features. And if you draw a lot from imagination and then you go and look at reference and you haven't looked at reference in a while, I think a lot of features will start to stand out to you of different, like if you think of like character creation again, like the video game thing, like different style of horns, kind of like look at like how the hands are, like there's could be hands that are connected with the arm of the wing and things like that. And just like kind of if you can mentally kind of like jot down whatever you find to be cool, then and then kind of like the next drawing, now you've gained these like ideas. And I think if you want to draw from imagination and you mostly draw from imagination, and then you see these ideas from life or movies, maybe online, however you absorb information, games, like real life, then I think these different features will really stand out to you. And then these you're just adding more things to your inventory that you can mess around with and add to your characters and that sort of thing. And I mean, same thing goes for environments, houses, buildings. Like it's all the same stuff. Using fundamentals as a basic build thing to build off of. And while I'm drawing, like I'm also learning different things about perspective, like this positioning with these two characters. I could then like warp the perspective more to kind of like fit these two characters into the scene. I could continue something up here where like this dragon um is now in he's flying into the air over there, and then I could have buildings, and all of this is expanding upon like foundations and fundamentals. So I think this is kind of just like the best way I see to do it, because you're kind of like grouping everything into one thing. So there's like you're practicing perspective, light and shadow, anatomy. You're practicing like different subjects. Like there's just so many things all learning at the same time. So I just think it's kind of like also very efficient, because then everything is all together in one spot, and I don't have to think whether I'm gonna practice perspective today or practice shading. And you can still like target things, like on all my drawings lately I've been mostly targeting perspective and just kind of like pushing that on each drawing, but I'm still gonna be doing anatomy and light and shadow and that sort of thing. So yeah, I hope that kind of helps for starting off with drawing from imagination. And if you're a complete beginner getting into drawing, I think this is kind of the way I would do it. If you're someone that wants to draw like your own characters and that sort of thing and mess around with that, And I mean, if you're doing like a comic book or a manga, you could do the that same thing. Just like draw your page out the best you can and put your characters in and then kind of like keep going and then make your next page like a little bit better and better, and it will just naturally happen from just like going for the idea or the drawing you want and being very brave about certain things. So yeah, that's just kind of like a mini video that I've been thinking of doing. I've been getting that question asked a lot of where to start when beginning and that sort of thing. So, and I've been thinking of kind of how to answer it, and I think a little bit of, for me, I play a lot of games, so kind of like some little game um, connecting kind of helps me think about how to do this like format of the video and that sort of thing. So yeah, I think basic understanding of fundamentals and trying to um, get into this phase of drawing and creating what you want as soon as possible, I think will definitely benefit you the most if drawing from imagination is something you want to do. And then you will just like naturally learn and get better with each drawing if you're keep being brave and pushing yourself. I know a lot of, sorry, I don't want to make this video that much longer, but I know a lot of, I've heard a lot of people that kind of think they haven't gotten better from drawing like from imagination only. I think there's like a lot of factors to it, but sometimes it's just they haven't spent like enough time on it because it is a very slow progress because you're building everything from like the ground up and you don't have references nearby to kind of like references basically have everything figured out, so you don't have to figure out on your own how certain things are. So drawing from imagination is definitely a slower process than that to kind of like achieve a certain look. But I think long term, being able to create your own stuff like is for me like this is kind of the only way I like to draw. I think drawing from like direct reference is like very boring for me. And I just want to draw like my own characters. I want to be able to draw a scene if I think of one and just that sort of thing. Like if I see a really cool movie, I want to be able to like almost continue that movie onto a piece of paper and like explore different things that maybe the movie didn't do, add characters that I think of, and just kind of like expand on kind of that impact that a show or movie had to me, or something I see in public. Like it could literally be anything. Like maybe I see a shirt or a certain like clothing outfit that I think is cool, but I'm like, oh, what if this and this were changed? And then I would go and experiment like with that outfit onto another drawing. So yeah, I think the faster you can transition and yeah, I really think for perspective, like just the spatial awareness, which a lot of it is just gonna be feeling it out. Like if you like learn basic fundamentals and then you transition to drawing like whatever you want on the page and you get discouraged because it doesn't look like someone else's art that you really admire and that sort of thing. I kind of there's like a couple things you can do. You could like maybe the your process or your subject isn't like enjoyable enough for you. So if you I would change like when I was drawing and I didn't like if I was like getting frustrated, usually it was this subject wasn't what I wanted it to be, or I was yeah, like if you kind of can make your process as fun as possible, I think you'll stick with it and get through sort of like the building up and progression part. So yeah, I know a lot of people kind of like go from fundamentals and then they start to draw from imagination, and then it almost like scares them with like they have like a big like I was the same way. I have like a big expectation for you were drawing from reference, and then you swap to imagination. You're like, oh, my stuff looks terrible because it doesn't look like this realistic portrait, or it doesn't look like someone else's art that's been drawn for 30 to 40 years, you know? So I would just like take it slow and know that you're getting better each time. And a really good way to look at the progression that you're making is once you draw like a few drawings, like however whatever you're drawing, if you like drawing scenes or that sort of thing, just kind of like attempt out the scene, and then like maybe it's not how you want it to be, but then draw like a few more, and then if you go back, like you're probably going to see like the improvement you make on each drawing. So yeah, the progress is pretty slow in art, and I think it's a little bit slower from drawing from imagination. But I think if it's something you want to do, definitely don't give up on it and kind of like keep with it. And yeah, I think that's kind of all I have to talk about. I hope this video helps, whether you're beginning or you're like wherever you are on a progression scale for your individual life path. Then yeah, hope this video helps the people that kind of want it. So yeah, all right, I'll see you guys.